somehow identified with her, and I remember thinking, I didn't really put it into words at the time. I've thought about it afterwards, but I really think that I thought, if she can be that out front and fearless, well, maybe I can too.
Want to listen to this episode ad-free? Head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And for an exclusive offer, I am offering you all a free trial to our ITBR professor level, which gives you all of our episodes, all of them unedited, and you can see all of the video footage. And do you know about the ITBR book club? On November 24th, we are actually meeting for the first time in person in Manhattan. We are going to meet at 3:30 p.m. at the Morgan Library and Museum, and we are going to talk about the personal librarian. If you are also a Wicked fan, at 12:30 p.m. on the same day, the 24th, a group of us are going to see Wicked at the AMC on 42nd Street in Times Square. So if you want to come and join us, that's where we'll be. Okay, hope I see some of you at the in-person book club at the Morgan Library at 3:30 p.m. Sunday, November 24th. And now, enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. You know I love a theater, film, TV show discussion, so you are in good company here with an expert on all things, not only theater, but a deep dive of the one and only Miss Divine, Bette Midler, the Divine M. So Kevin Winkler has just recently wrote a book called On Bette Midler, an Opinionated Guide. Kevin, if you don't know who he is, you need to. He has enjoyed a career of more than 20 years as a curator, archivist, and administrator at the New York Public Library, one of my favorite places. I'm actually about to pick up a book from there this weekend. So prior to being at the New York Public Library, he was a professional dancer. His books include Everything is Choreography, the musical theater of Tommy Tune, published in 2021, and Big Deal, Bob Fosse and Dance in the American Musical, 2018. No, we might have to talk a little about Bob Fosse before we turn to Bette Midler, which won the Theater Library Association's George Friedley Memorial Award, a special jury prize, was a finalist for the Marfield Prize from the Arts Club of Washington, D.C., and was cited as an ALA/ACRL Choice Outstanding Academic Title. He is an on-screen commentator for the acclaimed documentary Merrily Marvelous, The Dancing Genius of Gwen Verdon. That was in 2019. So welcome to the ITBR, Kevin.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be with you.
So I think, I want to definitely turn to Bette, and I'm sure talking a little about Bob Fosse, there'll be some through line to Bette Midler.
Sure.
I'm just curious, actually, first, because of all your work as a dancer. Bette Midler, when we think of her, we don't necessarily think of her as a dancer. We think of her charismatic stage personality. Is there something with Bette Midler, say, that differs from all the work that you've done with Bob Fosse's dancers, like Gwen Verdon?
Sure, sure. Well, this book is very different from the other two books that I wrote. Those books are heavily steeped in archival research and first-person interviews and theater history. This is a book of the key to the book is its subtitle, An Opinionated Guide. It's my opinion, my highly opinionated perspectives on someone whose career I followed for many, many years, and who has struck, I think, at a very early age, she struck an emotional chord with me that stayed with me for, into 40, 50 years on. So that was the reason, that was the impetus for writing this book, which, as you said, is very different from the other two books I've written.
Do you think that your fascination with the Divine Miss M, with Bette Midler, it really seems from your preface right away, you're just talking almost as if that fandom surrounding we can even just call it what it is, which is her gay iconic status as a
Mhm.
diva
Yeah,
in New York City, starting with the bathhouse, with the Continental Baths. Um, that there's just something that always captivated her audience, that she really just knew what she was doing in terms of starting from the ground up. Like, can you explain that fandom of just how she really knew who her audience was going to be and just kept following it?
sure. Well, I can start by actually talking a little bit about my fandom.
Yeah.
I have a distinct memory of seeing her when I was a teenager um, on television on The Tonight Show, on Johnny Carson's late night TV show. I'm sitting on the couch in my family's living room, and I was immediately taken with her. She came on and she sang the Joni Mitchell song for free, which I was familiar with, but I had never heard it sung the way that Midler sang it. She made it almost, there's an emotional element to it. And then she sat down with Johnny Carson and talked for a little bit, and she was funny, irreverent, um, a little a little raunchy, but good naturedly so. And I just loved her whole sense of moxie, of just being who she was, and not making any apologies for it. And I was a very shy, fearful little gay kid in the Midwest, and I she she touched something in me because she didn't look, sound, or act like a girl singer was supposed to, and I didn't look, sound, or act like a boy was supposed to. And I somehow identified with her, and I remember thinking, I didn't really put it into words at the time. I've thought about it afterwards, but I really think that I thought, if she can be that out front and fearless, well, maybe I can too in my own way. So I was and I am fans of lots of singers and actors and dancers, but the fandom, my fandom with Bette Midler, has always had more of a personal and more of an emotional component to it.
Were
But
you
did that
intent
answer your question?
No, it does, it does. Were you intentionally, like you said, um, like have you done interviews then, like with just your research? Did you interview Gwen Verdon?
No. So
Okay.
in terms, well, when I worked on my Fosse book, Gwen Verdon had passed away. She was no longer living at that time. But I interviewed people like Anne Reinking, Cheetah Rivera, a lot of Fosse dancers who had worked with them over the years. Same with the when I wrote the book about Tommy Tune, and with that I had Tommy Tune's cooperation. I interviewed him personally a number of times, and we talked on the phone a lot, and so I established a relationship with him. But for this, because it was very much a critical analysis of Midler's work as an artist, and I identify her upfront very emphatically as a real artist, um, as an artist across media. And because I wanted this to be, again, my opinion of her body of work, I purposely chose not to reach out to anyone who had worked with her. As a matter of fact, when I started working on it, I discovered that I'm Facebook friends with a couple of women who used to be harlots back in the day. And
Mm.
it's one of those 21st century social media things where you're friends with someone you've never met. But and I could have reached out to them, but I didn't want anyone's experience of working with her to color the analysis that I brought to the book about her work again across media. So I didn't reach out to Bette Midler. I include very few performance review quotes from performance reviews. Really nothing like that. It is the book is a distillation of my experience interacting with her performances on the stage, movies, television, and through her recordings.
Well, and we learned quite early, Kevin, that like with all of your work as an archivist, as a critic, an academic, that your work at the New York Public Library, that guess who frequents it, but none other than Bette Midler. And I was just listening to an interview with her from 2023 with Bruce Bozzi has a podcast. It's like Table for Two, and they're like eating. And she talked about, I'm sure you know, but her archive project. Like, is that why she was at the New York Public Library, was to like work on her archive? Or do you think she was just fascinated with the subject and is a devotee of the archive?
Well, she was quoted many years ago as saying, at heart, she is a librarian deep down inside. She's someone who, she's a reader. She's someone with a strong intellectual life, and she started when she back in the day, back when she was starting as a singer in New York. She would come to the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts at Lincoln Center. That was the location I spent most of my career in, and she would research songs, get sheet music, things like that for her performances. So she's someone who I think places a value on research, education, and reading and research. And so when I saw her, I only saw her a few times at the library. This is probably in the, I don't know, 2003, 2005, 2006, something like that. And I just saw her very briefly, kind of walking through the halls, and it never occurred to me to go up to her and introduce myself. Having spent a large part of my career as an archivist, working with researchers, and then turning around and becoming a researcher myself for my books, I've come to feel that the act of doing research is it's kind of sacred. And I find when I'm deep into research, I kind of go, I don't know, into the zone, I guess. And I don't like to be bothered. I'm focused. Research is always fraught to varying degrees. Library hours are never long enough. It always takes the staff a long time to get the material to you. So there's always a sort of a deadline element that's kind of hanging over your head. So it just never occurred to me that I would to reach out to her and introduce myself. And then I also thought, besides, she doesn't need to hear yet another middle-aged gay man tell her how much he loves her. I'm sure she's heard that over and over and over for many years. So I was just happy to respect her privacy and let her do her thing.
Yeah. Well, I find it really interesting that just like your highly opinionated guide on her, when she's describing now putting together her archive, that like she has this distancing of like seeing her past work and
Mhm.
the emotional memories that it brings up for her, like even just looking at letters. Or I think she
Yeah.
even says at one point that she fell into, it feels like a depression that she was in because of going into her past. Like when you were working on compiling your opinion of all the stages of her life, did it bring up your own personal memories of just, how her as an artist relates and connects to the stages and transitions of, Kevin Winkler's life?
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. Particularly her early years in New York, late 60s, this early 70s, before she really broke through and had a real nationwide success. That's like 72, 73. But that was she was in New York at it was both a fraught time, but it was also a really exciting time. She was here during at the time of the Stonewall riots in 1969. She worked with She worked with some important off Broadway theater makers in the late 60s. She was in one of the biggest hits on Broadway at that time, Fiddler on the Roof. And then she made her breakthrough singing in, of all places, a bathhouse. If you wrote this as fiction, you'd think, well, this doesn't make any sense. This could never happen. And yet it did happen. And she was right here in New York right on the cusp of a kind of new era of sexual liberation, gay liberation, and her performances at Continental Baths, I think, were foundational.
Have you ever asked yourself, how does Andrew know about all of these LGBTQ plus books, films, TV shows, even theater happening in New York City? Well, I'll give you all a look into my interview process. The Gay and Lesbian Review is my definitive magazine that I turn to. I have a digital subscription, and I learned so much about the current LGBTQ literature and TV and films that exist in the universe of all things queer art and culture. So Stephen Hemrick, the publisher, has promised me, and I know he keeps his promise, that the November-December holiday issue is going to be just such an incredible array of diverse voices in the LGBTQ community. So right now, though, you can read the September and October issue. It's called The Scientists, and it's all about investigating, interrogating queer science. Vernon Rosario, who's been on the podcast, has an article called The Origins of Transgender Science. Andrew Holleran, who wrote the definitive gay iconic book, Dancer from the Dance, has an article about Lord Byron and sexual mutations. William Benjamin has an article about Pervert Patient Zero. I need to read that right away. That's an incredible, enticing title. And soon I will have an episode coming out on Election Day. Yes, I'm releasing an episode on Election Day all about LGBTQ politics and just what does my co-host think about the current state of gay politics. So thank you to Stephen. The GNLR has an exclusive ITBR code. It is ITBR50. You receive 50% off. 50% off your print or digital subscription. So head to glreview.org, click subscribe, enter promo code ITBR50, and you will get 50% off. Also, make sure you follow the Gay and Lesbian Review on Instagram. It's at the GL Review, and you will see updates and teasers to upcoming articles, essays, and conversations that will be on their website and in the magazine. I hope you all enjoy your reading. So you all have heard me talk about my friend Christian Garcia's excellent podcast called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. Well, just in time for spooky season, everything fall and gothic, he just had on friend of the show, Joseph Federico, to talk about Dracula. Yes, Dracula starring Bela Lugosi. So you can now listen to that episode wherever you get your podcast, like Spotify or Apple. And you might have seen I've been releasing some That Old Gay Classic Cinema episodes on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. You can now listen to his premiere episode that I got to talk about The Sound of Music with him, which I really loves that I was on the inaugural episode. Thank you, Christian. Also, we released his Gone with the Wind episode, and we only released part 1. So to listen to part 2, you have to head over to his podcast. So if you love all things classic cinema and you've wondered, wait, what makes some classic cinema just really queer? Like, it actually sometimes is more homoerotic than current contemporary films. You want to listen to Christian's podcast. And he also has a special Wizard of Oz episode that I absolutely fan over. So listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema, Apple, Spotify, and he's on YouTube as well. I hope you all enjoy it.
In terms of all that was going on in the social world and the political world at that time. So she's an incredibly important figure. And I felt both, I wasn't here in New York at that time, but I felt a sense of nostalgia and a kind of, I don't know, looking at history as it was sort of passing by. As I was writing that early chapter about her career, and it was great fun to do it, but it also had, there was an emotional element to it as well.
Well, a friend of ours, David Armstrong, who you were on his podcast, Broadway Nation, I know
Yeah.
when he had come on my podcast, we talked a lot about the 70s, those liberatory musicals, or just how the sexual norms were being challenged. Like nudity gets into the musical
Oh yeah.
stage with O Calcutta. And what's so fascinating is even Bet being at the Continental Baths, which funny enough, I took voice lessons from a family friend in the Ansonia. So I've been to where the site of the
Yeah.
baths were, which is very different now, of course. It's
Oh
become
yeah.
more commercialized, but and I think it's still the home of AMDA, or at least when I took voice lessons, AMDA was like in the bottom or at the bottom of the Ansonia. I'm not sure
I
if
think
they're
they may
still
have moved. I think they may
there.
have
Okay.
moved some, maybe they have some studios there. I don't know. But yeah, I remember they used to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
like with David, it's so interesting because with your work on Bet with Bob Fosse, like Fosse's musicals too were right in that cusp of cutting edge. I'm
Oh
thinking
yeah.
of Pippin or I mean Pippin has
Chicago.
so much. Yes, yes. Even Cabaret,
Hmm.
before Pippin, there's so much going on. Um, and I heard Bet describe it as like she felt like she was living in New York City as if she was in Berlin in the 1920s, um,
I could
which I
see
can
that.
kind of
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. I could see that too. Yeah. There was lots of stuff bubbling up in the culture, and the culture was more welcoming of someone like her, who was very unconventional in her looks, in her approach to material, in her onstage persona. It was a perfect time for her to emerge. And what's also fascinating is that she created a performance aesthetic, if you will, in front of all these towel-clad men at the Continental Baths. And then she, in a very short order, she broke through into the mainstream and had tremendous mainstream success, was on television, recordings, big, selling out big concert halls and so forth. But she didn't really change her act much from the Continental. She really, as I think I say in the book, she took the boys from the Baths with her to the mainstream, and she acclimated straight audiences to their taste in humor, in fashion, in music,
Mm.
and in I don't know. I don't want to say lifestyle, but I don't like that word. But she introduced mainstream audiences to a wider group of people that they may have been aware were out there. That's a long-winded way of saying that, but I think you understand what I mean.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course. Well, and even my introduction to her, like so many millennials, is Hocus Pocus. And I mean, Winifred Sanderson is one of the most campy, drag-inspired characters. It's so queer coded that this was a Disney film, that this is something
I
that
know.
the community all surrounded and supports still, how it became a gay queer cult film. It's almost in the vein of Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. Whoever would have thought? Whoever would have thought? And I was around when that movie first came out in 1993, and it didn't really have legs. It kind of played for a while and then it disappeared. It was really with cable television and videotapes and DVDs, and then later streaming services that kids your age, began to be aware of it and come to love the film and love that character. So it's ironic that, again, I think I say this in the book, it's ironic that Winifred is probably her best known, most recognizable character today.
Yeah. And I heard her say it was her favorite character to ever play.
Oh, I think she actually absolutely had a ball playing that character. Oh, it plugs into all of her sweet spots as a performer, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw, but she was just on Sirius XM radio, and she's like, "You better, if they're going to do a Hocus Pocus 3, you better do it before I'm in the grave," basically,
Yeah, I know.
which
You know,
is
she has a new
hilarious.
movie coming out later this month. in just a couple of weeks, I think. So she's still going strong.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and was there a thought of yours now that your book is out? I'm sure so many ask you, but I have to, ask the question, which is if Bet did, if she does become aware of your book, which it's hard for me not to think she's not going to be aware of your book, like, would you want to know her opinion?
Sure, sure. Yeah, sure. Why not? Yeah, of course I would. Um, Actually, she does know about it. We had to get approved. I didn't know this, but my publisher told me that they had to get her approval to use her image on the cover of the book. So they sent the image to her attorney, and she just approved it through her attorney. And then we sent her an advance copy of the book before it was published. So I hope she it's very flattering. It's a very flattering book. I hope she likes it. I don't know. Maybe she'd want to punch me in the nose. I don't know. But sure, I'd love to know what she thinks of it. Yeah.
Well, that humor that she has, it's something that, like, whether it be Hocus Pocus or the First Wives Club, or even going back to her in the Tony Awards with Fiddler on the
Mhm.
Roof,
Uh-huh.
like, I think of how well she plays off of women in comedy. And
Yes.
it's like, there's something there that, like, when I was doing my research for sitting down with you, Kevin, what is it about just her presence in acting that it seems like she does really thrive off of a trio? Like, a lot of her roles involve women around her to play off of.
Yeah, absolutely. For someone whose persona at first was very sexualized, and she always was wearing I don't know, featuring her breasts and wearing, scantily clad or outrageous costumes, that sort of thing. For someone who had that kind of image early on, her I find her most copacetic co-stars over the years have been women. People like Shelley Long, Barbara Hershey, Trini Alvarado, who was in Stella, played her daughter in Stella, Kathy Najimy and Sarah Jessica Parker in the Hocus Pocus films, Goldie Hawn and Diane Keaton, Barbara Hershey and Beaches, on and on and on. And I think part of that has to be that she's a warm-hearted, giving person who doesn't feel she never comes across as someone who's in competition with other women, but instead she's got a warm, outgoing personality that's welcoming to everyone, and she seems to get along particularly well with women in her film, certainly.
Yeah. Well, and like I learned from your work too that she was part of a like an all women production company. Like
Oh
she
yeah.
has like groundbreaking activism. I mean, can you talk a little about what you learned, Kevin, regarding her philanthropy or social activism? I mean, you kind of touched upon it with her just always bringing the gay community with her, but it seems
Mhm.
like that's something that she always is never afraid to be outspoken about social or political causes.
About anything really. Before I yes, let's talk about that. I did want to also mention, backing up of what we were previously discussing. She also created a three-woman backing group for herself early on for her stage shows, the Staggering Harlettes, and she said, I like the power of a lot of women on stage, and
Mm.
I think that also speaks to her her interest in working with other women and supporting other women in what they do. And to that point, yes, she created a production company with a couple of friends called All Girl Productions, and they produced, I think Beaches was one of the films that they produced for the boys. Her World War II musical drama, and some other things. And I think they also produced some of her TV shows and some of her stage shows as well. Um, and you mentioned her philanthropy. Um, I think she's coming up on what is it? Maybe the 30th anniversary of the New York Restoration Project here in New York
Mm.
City, which is a not-for-profit that she formed in 1994 to help reclaim green spaces around the city. The story is that she moved back to New York after living in LA for a long time, and she was dismayed at how dirty the city was when she came back. And so she started this project to really clean up the city and make it more livable, and plant trees and get rid of garbage and so forth. And she's a right-on gal in that regard. She's a real philanthropist. She's not someone who sits back and says, well, they ought to do this, they ought to do that, someone ought to do this. She does it. And I think the legacy of the New York Restoration Project is one of her greatest achievements, really, because she made something happen from nothing, and it's had a huge impact on New York City. Yeah.
Yeah, that's her. Is it Halloween party she does in October is the fundraiser?
Halloween, yes. Halloween,
Halloween.
yes. Right.
Yeah.
Well, she's from Hawaii, so the hula is part of her, is part of her origin story, growing up in Hawaii, and she does that Halloween fundraiser for the New York Restoration Project every year, and I don't know how many $1 million it's raised, over the years.
Yeah. Well, and right, not only growing up in Hawaii, but growing up to Jewish parents who came from New Jersey.
I
It's like
know.
such a fascinating
I
story
know.
of, like, again, unconventionality is associated with Bette Midler, like
Sure.
from the beginning.
Right. 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 Yeah. Her parents were from, and they were married in New Jersey, and they moved to Hawaii during the war. Her father worked for the army doing as a laborer. Yeah, she and her siblings were born and raised just outside Honolulu, and she
Mm.
lived there until she went. I think she left and came to New York when she was only about 19, um, very young. But those first 18, 19 years of her life were spent in Hawaii.
Yeah. Well, there was something you said earlier, Kevin, that I definitely don't want to let pass, like as we're talking, which is you had this really interesting way of framing how an artist, like we'll take Bet, right, as a case study, because you're so close to her material in life, that she's in this underground, like literally underground bathhouse singing. But so many artists, Lady Gaga, I mean, you can name a lot of, I feel, um, gay iconic artists who are women, that they really start in this underground or like lesser known clubs, and they really are getting a following.
Sure.
And Lana Del Rey is coming to my mind too. But then they start to really understand that when they're going to break through, they still have to continue being true to who they are. Like, is that the way you feel someone who's an artist breaks through? Is that they have to, not that they have to just work their way up the ladder, but they have to at least know who their vision, like know the vision of who they want to become as a creative person.
Well, I think it's the authenticity that is so appealing to people. And if Midler moved out of the bathhouse, moved out of away from gay audiences, and completely changed her style, the material she sang, the way she sang, I don't think that would have been authentic. What was so attractive about her, what was so appealing about her, was her authenticity. She was who she was, and audiences can spot inauthenticity very easily when someone's sort of, I don't know, putting on an act or pretending to be someone they're not. Audiences sense that. So I think her genuineness came through. It's interesting when she first started transitioning into more mainstream clubs and started doing television and so forth, there was a certain amount of hand wringing in the gay press in New York, saying, "Oh, is she going to forget her gay fans? What are the people who made her? Is she going to change her act or whatever?" And that didn't happen. She was who she was. She just broadened her audience without having to flatten out or dumb down what she was already doing.
Mm. Well, and were those some of the obstacles that, like, I know right when she enters the mainstream, she also starts to land so many film roles, like one after the other. Um, is that something you think she had to really deal with, was how is she going to remain authentic in Hollywood, which is notorious for trying to create an image of you that will be more broadly appealing to a consumer?
Sure. Well, actually, when she kind of broke into the mainstream with her recording, she had a couple of big hit records, a lot of TV appearances, big shows and big arenas. Um, she was pursued for some movie roles, but she and her manager really held back, and they wanted her first film to be something really special, and for her to play a role that only she could play, not something that someone else could play. So she turned down some roles in the 70s. And it wasn't until 1979 when The Rose was released. That was her first film, and that was the big breakthrough in the movies. And of course, it was a huge hit. It's a galvanic performance. It's a brutal performance, and yet it has touches of frailty and gentleness in it. She's brilliant, and her vocals are. She's singing in a style she really had never sung in before. It's just a brilliant, brilliant performance. But as she said at the time, I don't know if I'll ever get another role like this again. Mm. And she didn't get another role like that. In the immediate aftermath of The Rose, again, she was nominated for an Oscar. She had a big hit with the soundtrack album. She didn't really get many offers. And she did a couple of films, a concert film, and then a film notoriously named Jinxed, that really was jinxed. And those two movies were flops. And it kind of labeled her as a kind of one-hit wonder of a movie star. And so there were a few years where she was kind of nowhere in movies. And it wasn't until she signed a contract with Walt Disney Studios, of all places, to do a series of comedies, Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Ruthless People, Outrageous Fortune, Big Business. That's when she became a big box office star. And she was one of the top 10 box office stars in the country in the mid to late 80s. So it was a huge turnaround from that period immediately after The Rose, when she wasn't getting any offers, to then be, the toast of Hollywood during those years in the 1980s. But I think, just one follow-up thought, she wasn't easily cast in movies. She's big. She's a big personality, and not every movie can contain her. And those comedies played to the obvious part of her appeal. She was sort of a mad woman and a crazy and a loud woman in those movies. But I don't think she knocks them. I certainly don't knock them. They were big hits and made her, very popular. But I don't think they were tapping into all that she had to offer, the full range of skills that she had to offer as an actor.
Mm. Well, it kind of makes you think that Winifred Sanderson allowed her the freedom of this, like, gothic witchy character, that she actually could, like, play up her comedic chops and
Yeah.
hide behind it in a way. So it's fascinating. I also feel like she's such an evolution of an actress. Like, she just always evolves. Like, you never know what her next step is. Like,
Yeah.
you never know, oh, okay, now she's going to do a residency in Vegas, like in the, early 2000s. And like that's
Right.
when I like discovered her again. Was I'm a huge fan of Kathy Griffin. And
Mm-hmm.
like she makes this appearance on the D list,
Yeah.
eating
Yeah.
like fried Oreos, and it's just hilarious.
Yeah.
But they're singing happy birthday to someone who's drunk, and he's like, my mom loves you. But again, you just feel her authenticity. It's like this is who she is. Like she
Yeah,
is going to walk in the New York Public Library. She's going to walk down Fremont Street. Like
yeah.
she's not a diva.
Not
And
not in
it's
that respect.
fascinating.
No, not at all.
No, no,
No, not
no.
at all. Yeah.
Like she is one of the people. And I find that what is it about the evolution of just who she is? Like she always is, it seems like she's always just challenging herself to learn more about her process. Like her process is never done.
I think that's true. Certainly, her stage shows, which I spend a lot of time talking about in the book, really showed her evolving as a performer, as an artist, as a kind of citizen of the world. Her humor, I know, in the later years became more pointed, um, more. She always made fun of famous people and politicians. You know, she used to call Richard Nixon Tricky Dick and things like that. But I think her comedy became more pointed, more political, and she took some hits for that. But everything's political these days. But she it's very clear. She made it clear that she was a citizen of the world, that she was an evolving person. She's not just a diva sitting on a throne.
While I'm no longer a Long Island resident, yes, I have graduated to North Jersey. I've moved in with my boyfriend, and I'm just very grateful. So when I like to reminisce and recall the beautiful fall nostalgic memories I have about Port Jefferson Village, located in the middle of Long Island, right on the Long Island Sound, you can see Connecticut on a clear day. I think about the Soapbox NY, a beautiful bath and body boutique. My friend Janine Cucci is a co-owner there. Her mother, Mariana, is at the helm of the ship. And I know that they have such wonderful fall products, from apple cider shea butter soap to pumpkin spice sugar scrub, Orchard Breeze hand and body lotion, and yes, Farmhouse Fresh, a paraben free and very, very environmentally friendly and animal friendly company. They do not test any of their products on animals. Splendid Dirt is a wonderful pumpkin mud mask that I still use even when it's not the fall, because who doesn't want to smell pumpkin in the summer? I do. So head on over to Instagram, TikTok at the Soapbox NY. If you message Janine on Instagram, she will get back to you within the day. If you want just like an assortment of some of her favorite fall products, she'll put that together for you. And if you need a beautiful town to visit in the Northeast, head on over to Port Jefferson, because it is such a beautiful town, especially in the fall and the winter season. Okay, I hope you all enjoy your Soapbox NY products as much as I do. Are you currently looking for your next great read and you just don't know where to search? Well, I have a publisher for you. They are called Broadview Press. They're celebrating their 40-year anniversary. Happy anniversary, Broadview. And they are an independent publisher of humanities books. So next month, for Native American Heritage Month, I have on Dr. Andrea Sullivan Clark, and she is going to educate us on indigenous philosophies of Turtle Island. You might wonder what Turtle Island is. And if you're listening and are in North America, I'm just going to give you a hint. You probably are in Turtle Island territory. So I can't wait for you all to hear more about Native American history and culture, just subjects that we need to learn about and we just don't in our primary school education. So Ways of Being in the World is Andrea's book. I can't wait for more of you to get your hands on it. Also, just in time for the Wicked film, Broadview Press has an edition of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz with the original illustrations. I was talking with Dylan from Broadview Press, and I always love talking with her because she informs me of what new books they're about to release. And guess what? Just in time for spooky season in the fall, they have a vampire literature anthology that collects so many different short stories that explore the vampire myth and just how this origin story of the vampire came to be in our culture. So I hope you get your hands on those books. And Dylan told me there is an exclusive code for all ITBR listeners. You get 20% off all of your Broadview Press orders. Broadviewpress.com. Go choose your books, type in Ivory Tower in the discount code section, and you will get 20% off. Make sure you follow Broadview Press to see all the new books that they are about to publish on Instagram at Broadview Press. Enjoy your reading, everyone.
And having people put acts together for her, or get movies made for her, or go to the library and do research for her. She does it herself. So I think that's something, again, that genuineness, that sense of authenticity, I think that comes through, literally in everything that she does.
Yeah. Well, even the state of Broadway, I feel when she came to Hello Dolly and the fanfare in 2018 around her being back on Broadway, um, there's not many at her level who have come back to Broadway. I mean, one of my favorite actors is Meryl Streep. I've always wanted her to come to
Yeah,
Broadway,
yeah,
or even Barbara Streisand. Like, I do feel that, not to say it's beneath them, but there are some who don't want to put themselves through the Broadway schedule and the
yeah,
demands. So, like,
yeah.
what did you learn about what was it about Hello Dolly that she knew, okay, I'm going to come back to Broadway?
Yeah. Well, she actually she had done a play on Broadway a couple of years earlier called "I'll Eat You Last." It was a
Mm,
one-woman play where she played Sue Mengers, who was sort of a 1970s super agent in Hollywood, and
mm,
um, that had a limited run, and I thought she was terrific in it. She was wonderful, and I suspect she may have been trying to get her feet wet to see what it was like to do 7 or 8 shows a week on Broadway. And then a few years later um, came Hello Dolly. And I think uh, I suspect what they paid her a lot of money, um, and the show was tailored to her, and I think it was an opportunity to be on stage, to commune with an audience, and yet not have a whole show like her concerts were sort of on her shoulders. But here with Hello Dolly, it's a beautifully constructed vehicle for a star, and it's just like a little jewel case of a showcase for you. And all she had to do was embody that central role. And I think that I can't help but think that she didn't want to deny herself that
mm.
pleasure of starring in an iconic role in a sumptuous revival, and in a role that seemed tailor made for her. She was fabulous in the show. She was just delightful. Did you see her in it?
No, I've seen clips, but
Yeah,
I didn't see that production. But I know, like, after she left, Bernadette Peters came
yeah,
in, and
yeah.
then, like, one of my favorite um performers, Betty Buckley,
Oh yeah.
did it on tour.
Mhm.
So it's been, like you said, it's a great vehicle. It's almost the way Norma Desmond is an excellent vehicle for,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
actors.
yeah.
Um,
I just couldn't help but think that she didn't want to deny herself the joy of having that experience of starring in a great show like this on Broadway. And I'm so glad she did.
yeah. Well, talking about just the state of Broadway, with all of your background, Kevin, do you feel like it does seem kind of like we're back to this moment where um titular or like pivotal actors are entering the scene again, and like shows are really being catered around personalities. Like even Audra McDonald is about to be Mama Rose in
Yeah,
Gypsy.
yeah,
Nicole Scherzinger is going to be Norma Desmond. Like
right.
it seems like the persona of the actor is the linchpin of like audiences wanting to go to the theater. Like, do you think that's just because we're in the state of Broadway? Like, I'd find it hard for a Bob Fosse musical right now to actually break through because those ensemble dance shows are not really being given the limelight. I mean, maybe I'm like just a little uh my own critical opinion, but I feel like there really is now the star power running a musical.
Well, I think, shows like Gypsy, Sunset Boulevard, Hello Dolly, those shows are always going to be revived because they're terrific showcases for stars. Um,
Mhm.
the only reason to do Gypsy again on Broadway is to feature a new star in a new role. I can't wait to see Audra McDonald in it. I'm sure she's going to
Mhm.
be terrific. I can't Sunset Boulevard, which is not one of my favorite shows, but that's a star vehicle, and I'm fascinated to see Nicole in
Mhm.
this role in what sounds like a completely revamped production, stripped down production. So I think star vehicles, star showcases are always going to be produced because people want to see stars. But there's still shows that are more ensemble based that continue to get produced and continue to be successful. I mean, look at Hamilton. Um,
Mhm.
Lin-Manuel Miranda is long gone, or Leslie Odom Jr. They're long gone from Hamilton, and yet it continues to sell out.
Mhm.
Um, so there's always room for good theater, exciting theater that really speaks to audiences. But I know what you mean. I think the the Broadway climate today seems to be built around sensation and special effects and
Mhm.
just a kind of an overpowering experience. Um, and shows like Fosse's shows, for instance, I think if you're going to do them, you need to almost slow down and savor the nuances of those shows, and that's where their impact comes through most forcefully. Um, so and things ebb and flow. We go through phases where those kind of ensemble shows are not making it, and then we'll go through a period where it's nothing but ensemble shows or star vehicles or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think we're done with the jukebox musical era. I think people will continue making those as long as at least some of them are successful, like the Michael Jackson musical, for instance.
Mm.
So again, I think things ebb and flow, but stars are eternal. Star vehicles are, like I said, are always going to get done.
Well, and just from like your conversations with, I mean, Cheetah Rivera is a legend and, will be remembered
Sure.
for just decades. And Riking the same. Bob Fosse really knew how to choose. Maybe not choose isn't the right word. He knew how to motivate. I mean, Ben Vereen from
Mm.
Pippin. Like he
Mhm.
really knew how to bring together triple threats who knew how to work with an ensemble, right? Like each of those three
Yeah.
knew how to work with the ensemble. Like they were from the
Well,
ensemble,
I was going
actually,
to say
right?
all three of them were from the ensemble. They were all we're not supposed to say gypsies, but they were all chorus
Yeah.
dancers, who by dint of their own talents and personalities moved forward. So they understood and they appreciated, the hard work of the people who were behind them, on stage. So yeah, Fosse had a great eye for talent and for casting ever so slightly against type, kind of out of left field casting. Ben Vereen's role in Pippin, that role was meant for an old white man, an old vaudevillian, and they
Mm,
couldn't find anyone. They were not having much luck finding someone the right age and the right talent skill set during rehearsals, and so they kind of rejiggered it and brought Ben Vereen in to audition, and he knocked them out to such an extent that they said, "Well, let's rewrite it and rewrite it to showcase his talents." So that's a perfect example of Fosse being fluid and nimble enough to say, "This might not work. Let's try something different, and it might be terrific."
yeah. Well, and I'm sure um, when he does that number, Bob Fosse, when he was in Kiss Me Kate and does the song from this moment on, and he was
Mhm.
able to do his own choreography. And there's like this transition moment in that choreography where he comes out with, I forget who the female dancer is,
Carol
but
Hayne. Yeah.
thank you, thank you. And that you can just see that there's an era of choreography changing in Broadway. And like he's going to usher this in. And it kind of feels like Bette Midler was part of that same, we're ushering in this new moment.
Yes, that's yes. Oh, I agree with everything you said. Kiss Me Kate, that movie, Kiss Me Kate, it's terrific, but it's a very conventional, the choreography and the dancing is very conventional. And then in that split second, when Fosse and Carol Haney come out for that, it's about, I don't know, 47 seconds or something, that dance that they do, you could just feel the whole texture of the movie changed. There was a kind of a sexy vibe that all just reached out, beyond the screen. And it was less than a year later that he had choreographed Pajama Game on Broadway and won a Tony Award. And really, that was the very start, of a brilliant career. That was, yeah, with Bette Midler, she really influenced a lot of singers, a lot of cabaret artists in terms of investigating a kind of off the beaten track song selections, trying different takes on songs, different interpretations. Um, her costuming in the 70s, we don't think about it so much anymore, but back in the 70s, she wore lots of vintage clothes, kind of her look, she called it trash with flash, a trashy kind of look. Um, and she influenced people in terms of style, musical selections, musical performances. So she was highly influential.
Mm. Well, one of my, like, as we're wrapping up, this was, went by so quick. It was so enjoyable to talk with you, Kevin. Is like, what was just something like you're carrying forth after having, put out this work on Bette Midler? Uh, what's like a lesson or something that you just always carry with you every day that has been inspired by Bette Midler?
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's a tough one. Let me
Mm.
say. Let me see if I can answer that in a coherent way. Let's say. Well, I writing the book, I was really reminded of of what an iconoclast she was and is, how fearless she was and is, um, and her approach to her art and I guess to life as one in which you don't sit back and let someone else take care of things. You jump in. If you want a career, you jump in and you see what works for you. If you want a cleaner New York, you jump in and make that happen. If you're upset that your friends are dying of AIDS and the government is doing nothing, then you jump in and help. Um, so that's a powerful example and a very positive example. And I'd like to think that I've taken some of that from Bette, from following her for so many years and then writing this book.
Mm. Well, that's a powerful sentiment to end on. I think that active consciousness is something uh, we really are in need of right now, are people to wake up and be empathetic and bring the community together.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Now more than ever, now today more than ever, at any time in my adult life. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're in the precipice of a new era right now. And living through it is might seem stressful, but there are moments of brightness and, you know, the arts that are going, like the rejuvenation in the arts happening right now gives me hope. Because I do think
Mhm.
there's a lot of newness, but you're also seeing the side of darkness. So it's just trying to maintain that sense of hope and optimism under the duress.
That's a good way of putting it, I think. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. younger generations, new people come along, they're always the lifeblood. They're always the energizing force. If and of course, building on the work of other generations, older generations who come before them, but the new people in public life, in the arts, anywhere, it's the younger people who will take what's happened in the past and then push it forward, hopefully in a positive way.
Yeah. Well, and I feel that Bet, so embodies that lifting people up and bringing them along, like not
Oh, I think so.
closing the door behind her. She is someone who continues to just keep the door open for generation after generation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kevin, how can everyone out there, make sure that they can get their hands on Bette Midler? Follow you on social media. What are all your
Thank you.
links for everyone?
Well, I probably the easiest way to get the book is to order it on Amazon or wherever you buy books online. It's available in all the online outlets or at a bookstore if you can find a bookstore these days. And I feel like an altacaca. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter or X. I don't check it that often. Facebook I check quite a bit. And I put a lot of stuff about the book, about what I'm doing professionally on my Facebook page. So that's probably the easiest way to follow me. I'm
Wonderful.
still trying to learn Instagram, Snapchat. I'll stop talking because I really do sound like an altacaca.
Well, I'll talk to you. We can get you on Instagram soon,
Okay,
Kevin. But
might have to
that's a
hold
good
my
one.
hand. Okay.
Well, the links to Kevin's book are in the show notes, so make sure you go check that out. Thank you so much. I always love talking anything about acting and theater and the craft. So this was wonderful. Thank you,
Andrew,
Kevin.
Andrew's great. I really had a ball, and thank you so much you really did your homework. You
Oh, well.
really came to this interview fully packed with information and great questions. So I really appreciate that. It's been a
Oh,
pleasure.
thank you, Kevin. Okay, well, bye to everyone out there listening, and until next time.
Okay.